Yeah, so we'll just have basically a conversation, and
Okay.
I'm gonna let you do most of the talking, and
All right.
um, yeah,
Okay, we're almost
whenever,
ready
whenever
here.
you guys are set, just let me know.
You ready, Zane?
Did you mess the camera up?
I tried my best.
Okay.
Okay, and you're just gonna have him identify himself.
I will, yeah, okay.
Okay.
You good to go?
I'm rolling. Are you
Okay.
rolling, Zane?
I'm rolling. Great. All right. My name is Robert Bauman, and I'm conducting an oral history interview with Samuel Moore. Right.
Right,
Today's date is July 9, 2013.
Right.
And the interview is being conducted on the campus of Washington State University, Tri-Cities. And I'll be talking to Mr. Moore about his experiences working Hanford site, living in Richland, and so forth. So maybe let's start essentially from the beginning. If you could tell me how
Okay.
and why you came to Hanford, how you heard about it, how you got here.
Okay, I'm going to tell you how I got here. My father was working at a cook in the mental section of Camp Chaffee, Arkansas, and he came home and he says, "There's a better job at Hanford, Washington." So he left and came out. Then he told them that I can't be here without my family. So they put us on I think it was a troop train, and it stopped in Pasco and set us off.
So
And
where is Camp Chaffee, Arkansas? Where
it's east of Fort Smith,
okay.
in that. So
And how old were you at the time?
about 8,
Okay.
and then we come in. They put us off of this. I'll call it troop train because there was a zillion soldiers on it. And they picked us up and they took us to Kennewick, to a place called Naval Housing. And that's where they put the people coming in for Hanford workers to stay until the house was available. And we stayed there, and then from there we moved to this nice little square building which had a flat top set up on steels, and it was called a prefab at 1300 Totten Street. And we being that we lived at the end house, the telephones were on the telephone poles at the end of the block. So when the phone would ring, you were told to answer the phone and go get whoever wanted who. So that's the way we started in Richland. And we lived there for I don't know how long. And then we moved to different houses around Richland until I graduated from Columbia High School, which was Columbia High School in Richland at that time. Now it's Richland High. But and then after that, I did a short job with a construction company, and then I went to work for General Electric in their running one of their blueprint machines when they were getting ready to build the Radox building and the Purex building. So I was the first one in to warm up the machines and run them for a while, and then after a while I got uplined and I could deliver those suckers out into the area. So that was my starting it with General Electric then.
Okay, so let me go back a little bit. So what year did your family arrive then?
It was either 1943 or 44.
Okay, and your father, was he a cook here also?
No, he come out and he was as we call him today, rent-a-cop. He was a patrolman out there, and he worked as a patrolman till he retired. And
you said that your first job was with General Electric, and what year would that have been?
About 1953 or 4. So, and then I went from there. Like I say, I was in the blueprint sections and all that, and then I had a job. I got a chance to become an engineer's assistant, and when they were going out and building different things, so that helped me get into the other sections of the General Electric then. So, and when that one cut, I transferred into a radiation monitoring and that was when they had the Hanford Labs, and the old animal farm was at 100F area, and that. So I worked in that group until I forget what year it was. I can't not good on years and dates, but when they decided they were going to retube all of those reactors out there in the 100 areas, and so they could put bigger slugs in them and all that stuff, I worked on that until about 1957, and they said, "Guess what? We're not going to pay you anymore." So I left here, but I stayed with the government job. I went to Nevada Test Site and blew all the plutonium up that they made out here. So then I came back to Hanford in 1960. So then I was still in radiation monitoring and worked all kinds of different places, tank farms and everywhere else out there that I could think about.
So it sounds like you worked all over the Hanford site, right?
All over the Hanford site, that's right. Yes, everywhere. And I worked a lot of the times at the burial grounds in 200 West area, when they would take the big wooden boxes to Purex and Radox, and they'd fill them, and then they'd pull them up, and they'd put a big long cable on the whole string of cars, and that box was way down that string of cars. And then when they get up to the burial ground, the train and they would coordinate, and they'd pull it back, and as the cable would come around, and when the box got to the trench, train would stop, and they'd just spin it around and down in the trench. And then we'd get the honor of riding the bulldozers to set dose rates so they could cover them up. So, and that was one of the deals. And the other times I worked in a lot of the tank farms and pulling pumps and putting new bearings in those pumps and all that kind of stuff. So it was an experience, believe me. So
Yeah, I'm sure it was. So
Yeah.
and a lot of this was with radiation monitoring?
with radiation monitoring, and I was in radiation monitoring until 1980 something, and I had a little problem out there, and they wanted me to release some stuff, and I said, not me, it ain't mine. So they said, well, we got this other section over here that you should be in. So I got into the safety part of dealing with respiratory protection, and I was trained to repair the breathing air things like the firemen use. I was trained to do that, fix the PAPRs and the escape packs and all that stuff. So, and check every places for where they oxygen levels to where they could go in and work and all that. So that was my last 8 years of Hanford, was in the respiratory section, I'll call it. So,
Okay.
and that. So
And so when did you retire then? When did you
in 1994, and
So almost 40 years minus the years that you were
yeah,
done.
yeah. Well, as the way I said, when I came back to Hanford in 1960, they told me it was a temporary job. It'd probably only last 6-8 months. Well, I found out that at Hanford, a temporary job is pretty permanent. It only lasted 33 and a half years. It's a temporary job there, so I guess it all turned out pretty good. So
Guess you could consider that temporary.
temporary, yeah. So
So many interesting things that you worked on.
okay,
So let's go back maybe to the early years.
Okay.
First,
Okay.
there in the 1950s, and you talked about radiation monitoring. Some with radiation, you did blueprints and stuff, but then
Yeah.
radiation monitoring.
and then radiation monitoring, yeah.
Okay, and some of that was with animals. Is that right?
Well, I went into the animal farm on some certain times, but I wasn't assigned there for anything. The big one I was assigned to was what they called the 558 project, which was when they retubed all of the old reactors, and that was you go in and set dose rates for all the people who go in there working, and so it was a deal.
And now Hanford, of course, was a highly secure site, right? Very lots of security, secrecy to a certain extent. Can you talk about that at all? I mean, in terms of
Well,
getting to work or at work, how did that impact you?
It was most of the places where I was, the secure part of it wasn't that strict, but other places like some of those buildings, yeah, they were really a strict situation. And when let's go back a ways, when my dad and then when we lived in this, I call it the slum house on Taunton Street. That was real estate. Nobody knew what was happening. Nobody knew. I didn't know what the guy next door was doing, and they didn't know what my dad did, and until I think it was 1944 or 45 when they announced what they were really doing here, and it was kind of a shock that deal. So that was my deals of the secrecy out there.
Sure.
And
now, were you able to? Now, did you have to have special security clearance?
yes, I did. I had special clearances. Yes, I had everything but the very top secret one, and that was real handy because when I left here, I went to the Nevada test site. I had to use the same secret pass, and then the same thing when I come back, and so it was very, very. What am I trying to say here? Remember, I'm an old guy. I'm just about at the end of the road here, so there's most of my work, like I say, was the tank farms and those places where secrecy was not involved in that. So, and it was like times when you'd have a spill, you'd dig it up and carry it to the burial ground. That was a lot of that was the work that we did. So.
You said your first job was at General Electric. Obviously, there are different contractors.
Yeah.
Who all did you work for over the years?
Well, we went to General Electric. Then it went to. There was one called Isochem, Rockwell. Oh, there's a whole slug of them. I can't remember all of them. So it seemed like every time you turn around, they were turned over to somebody new. And but it was Westinghouse when I decided I would better leave before I had a real problem. And
so, can you talk about what was happening there toward the end that made you want to leave?
Well, I was like I say, I was working on the PAPRs and all that kind of stuff. It got to be a real drag, and everybody was doing that, and it got to the point where every time you turn around, everybody was wanting this and wanting this and wanting this, and you're only one person, and I was the guy that did most all the fixing. So I decided to my wife, I says, I call her the voice from the other side. She said, "What's the matter?" And I says, "Well, before I mess up on one of these pieces of equipment and kill somebody, I think I better retire." So we just decided, okay. And she worked for the Hanford project too. So, and of course, she was much better off than I would. She worked for one of the big managers as a secretary. But so we just decided that was it, and we had our nest eggs saved up and said, okay, it's retired and we're going to see the world. And we did that until my one eye decides to go bad and we had to stop. So other than that, I'd probably been in who knows where.
while you're working at Hanford, were there any significant events or sort of things that happened that sort of stand out in your mind?
Yeah.
Specifically?
And I was trying to think, it was about 1962, graveyard shift, 233S, it caught on fire. And it burned. And it was a big mess. That's where I wound up with my shot of plutonium in my bones, as I'll say, from that fire. And of course, back in those days, you didn't know what was what. So, then they worked on it and cleaned it up. And but there's a couple of contamination things that sticks out in my mind. That and one of them is we used to bury the material from 300 area, which is, I guess you would call it Westinghouse, Battelle, or somebody. And we used to dump them into caissons in the back of the backside of the 234-5 area. And we had one of those that kind of broke open and messed us up a little bit. It took us maybe 6-8 hours to get cleaned up, so we were able to go on our merry way. So, and but those are the only two that really stick out in my mind. That, and
did you miss any amount of work as a result of those exposures when you had those? Or?
Nope. They just cleaned you up and said go back to work. You'll have to remember that back in those days, all the things that happened at a lot of places, we didn't know. We didn't know what the repercussions was going to be. We didn't know that. Now, this is why we're paying for a lot of stuff right now, is because we didn't know how to do all that stuff. But like I say, there's a lot more people that know a lot more about that Hanford stuff than I do, and and like I said, it's been many a year since I worked some of those places too, that I can't remember some of the stuff,
Sure.
So.
The radiation monitoring group, or
Yeah.
how large of a group was that? I mean, how many sort of employees do you know? I mean, idea worked in.
Oh, there was probably about 60 or better, and but each company, I think, had a group of their own. The 200 areas had one big group. The 100 areas had a group, and then 300 area had a group. So you put them all together, there's probably more than 60 some,
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay, just you said there was a fire in, you think about 1962 is
Yep,
the 200 area?
in a 200 down behind the Radox building.
Okay.
That just poof was it, and it went. So, and I think the reason they had the fire was because somebody had some greasy coveralls and stuff and didn't take care of them the proper way, and the first thing you know, poof, they were on fire. So,
And this is where there was radioactive material.
yeah, and it was back in the radioactive area, so everything got messed up. So,
And like I said, at the time you probably didn't know necessarily everything, but
yeah.
you had some health problems since then.
Oh yeah, yeah. It, but I won't say that my health problem is caused by the contamination that I had or was dumped with. I've had quite a few of those. I've had a melanoma cancer in this ear, and I had a very large contamination that got into that ear and area. So it's so I've had to have some surgery done there, skin grafts and that kind of stuff. So, but So far, it hasn't slowed me up.
I'm going to shift gears just a little bit here. Were you working here in 1963 then, when President Kennedy came to?
Yeah, yeah.
And do you remember that at all? Were you there that day?
I know. I was on the project that day, but I was not out where he was. I was one of the, I guess how would I say this, the lower steels. So I took care of the work over while everybody went to that. So, but yeah, I was here. I came back from Nevada on September 13th, 1960, and I worked till 94.
And then I want to ask you a little bit about Richland.
Okay.
Other than when you first got here, it sounded like
Yeah.
you lived in Richland the
Yeah.
rest of the time.
Yeah.
How would you describe Richland as a community at the time, as a place to live?
It was very good because at that time, when you were there, you didn't even have to worry about locking doors. I mean, it was just one big thing. It was a government town, and everything would deal like that. And nobody really didn't have the vandalism or anything like that around town. And as you probably know, that if you're familiar with Fred Myers and Wellesley and Way down there, that was a swamp fun deal, because that was where Richland got their drinking water. So, and like I said, I lived at 1303 Totten the very first time, and then we moved from there down to on Benham Street, and I don't know how to say this other than the way I normally say that, but that was down where we called the turd churn. That was the sewage plant down there. Then from there I moved back up to Swift, and then in I was trying to think when it was, 1963 or so, they had did away with the old irrigation ditch that came through Richland and goes underneath Carmichael, because that's where they flooded the cattail place down there for the drinking water in Richland and let it seep down and pumped it up. And they busted everything up. And back about then, I was reading the Villager, I think it was, the Tri-City paper, and there was a lot for sale on Totten Street. So I bought it and went up and looked at it. It was the old irrigation ditch, and I built a house over the old irrigation ditch, and I still live there. So.
And you first arrived, you were a child.
Yeah.
What was it like going to school? I'm assuming that there are people from sort of all over.
All over,
country,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. And you just walked to school, and like I say, there was no buses or anything. You could walk to school, and everybody just seemed to be fit right in. You know, nobody had any qualms whether I was from Arkansas or anywhere else. You know, so. But like I say, when the first house there in Richland, Wright Avenue was the last street in town, and beyond that was one of the most fabulous cherry orchards that there was. And when you were a kid, you'd always slip over in the cherry orchard and get cherries and take them home to your mother, and she could make you some jams, jellies, and whatever, or pie or whatever. But it was a deal. And there was quite a group of kids that come from all over the country, and they just seemed to fit in. None of this gang thing or anything like that. They were just, everybody was old buddy, you know.
And you said you went to Columbia High School.
Yeah.
How about elementary, middle school?
And elementary school, when we moved, the one that I really remember was Lewis and Clark down on the south end of town. And I went there until one of the, I'll call them students, decided to burn it down. And they burnt Lewis and Clark down, and so a lot of us were told to go up to Marcus Whitman and finish off the year up there. So we did that. So, and then from there on, that Carmichael, the junior high was being built, and I think they opened it up at about a mid-year, and I was one of the ones that went there the mid-year into Carmichael, and then over to the high school after that, and so.
And so what year was that Lewis and Clark burned down? Then like the late 40s then, maybe?
Yeah, I'm coming to, but the funny part of it is, not too many years ago, they arrested a fellow down in Portland, and he was laughing about burning the building down. So I guess they couldn't do anything to him, but they found out who burned it down, though. So, but yeah, there was there was Lewis and Clark's, Marcus Whitman's, Sacagawea, which was right there by Central United Protestant Church, was the old Sacagawea school. And then there's Jefferson, which is still going, and our fabulous people are trying to shut it down, move it, and do something else with it. But who knows what's going to happen? So,
Do you remember when you were growing up and going to school, living here at that time, any community events, parades? Or
oh yeah, we used
showcases that
Atomic Frontier Days was the big thing, and I have breakfast with a group of Columbia High graduates, and I can't remember what her name is, but she was one of them that we used to run for the Queen of Frontier Days, and there was a couple of others that, but that was the big thing, and they used to take the old Howard Amon Park turned into booths and just like a big fair down there. So it was things, and then all of a sudden they decided to move everything around to the Tri-Cities. So,
And was that in the summer?
yeah, that was always in the summer, and then the big hydroplane races, they would come in, but they were the old ones that had the 12 or 1300 horsepower gasoline engines in them, the noise makers, and but that was about the extent of the thing was, so, and I can go back. I can remember the floods that came through, and when they built all the dikes that they're tearing down now. So, but I don't just got to worry about that being the dams are still functioning. So.
But you remember some of the floods from?
Oh yeah. I can remember when the flood deal is when they built the road up going to the Y. There was they had to build all that up because you didn't get to the Kennewick when the flood was on. It was right up to the George Washington Way Road there by wherever the guy that has them petrified stumps down there. The water was just across the street from his house, was right up to the edge there. So.
So I want to go back now into your to Hanford itself and your work experiences there. You've talked about some of the specific things you did and some specific things. How would you describe Hanford as a place to work?
Hanford was a real good place to work. It was really good place to work. Mainly, I think, because you didn't know everything that was going on. So you knew that you had your section, what you were doing, and you didn't want to make waves or something like that. But to me, Hanford was a good place to work. There was a lot of, I had a lot of good friends that came up through the, I call them the ranks, they were like I worked in Blueprint, and there was guys that drove the mail trucks and all that. We wound up as a real knit group of people there. They work out of the old 703 building, which part of it's still there, and we used to have Coke breaks, and go back there, and everybody put a quarter in the pot, and then get your Coke bottle. And when it was all through, whoever had the bottle that was from furthest away got the kitty. So it was a good place to work, really. So
And I guess, is there anything or any things you would like future generations to know about working the Hanford site? Or
well,
any of that?
I would like everybody to know that where this country really screwed up was when we dropped that bomb and blew up everything. We kept everything too secret. They should have let everybody know what that was and what was happening. They would have had a better deal of doing what they're doing today if they'd have done that. I think now that's my opinion and no one else's, but that if they would have just let them know what was going on and what happened, it would have been a lot better. So
And then, is there anything that I haven't asked you about in terms of either your job at Hanford or jobs, I should say, at Hanford,
No.
or living in Richland community that I haven't asked you about that you'd like to talk about? Or?
no, like I say, Richland was a good place to live, though, and Hanford was a good place to work. I mean, you did your job, and everybody else did theirs, and everything worked out just fine. And there's a lot of things that I'm not too sure of what happened, but a lot of those places they did have things from they were doing experiments for the Navy and all that kind of stuff out there. But I didn't get in on any of that stuff at all. So, but it was one of those deals. You go in and you dress out, and most of the time the monitors were the first ones in and the last ones out. So that was the deal.
When you did that, did you have like a
Yep.
badge, a monitor?
Yeah, TLD, thermoluminescence dosimeter. So you always had a badge on. I understand that some of the guys used to take theirs and set them aside so they wouldn't get too much radiation, so they would be eligible for overtime. But I wasn't into that overtime route. So
And so how would you know? How did it register that you had too much exposure or something? I mean, how
well,
was that read?
they put it into a meter that would read what the thermals and the original ones were. What am I trying to say? Film. There was a film, and they would read the film of how much had been exposed to that, and that's how they got your dose rates, or how much you took and that. So.
And did that change at some point to some other
And
method?
yeah, and well, that was they used the film badges and to start with. Then they flipped over and they found out they could use these, what I call them, thermoluminescence detectors, which is you put a charge on them and they I guess the radiation would discharges the charge, so they'll know how much was used off of it. So, and then you had pencils that you read that would tell you. It would read if you were supposed to take, let's say, 50 MR. Well, you'd get that one. You come out, you'd be there, and there was always timekeepers. There was a timekeeper in that group that was taking how much your exposure was and how long you had been there, and calculating it to when you should get yourself out, and that. So.
And they would let you know then? if
They,
it's time to-
they'd tap you on the shoulder and say, go. So then they'd go out, and then there would be somebody out there that would get them undressed and check them and clean them and make sure they were all, no contamination on them, and either send them to lunch or home. So, and
And that sort of procedure.
that procedure,
Throughout
just
the time you were
throughout the
there.
whole time I was there, yeah. Yeah. So it,
All right. Well, thank you very much. I
Yeah.
really appreciate you
Yeah.
willingly come in and talk to us. And very interesting.
Yeah, it's there's like I say, there's things out there that my mind just doesn't pick up on them right now. So probably the middle of the night at 1 o'clock, I'll wake up and say, "Golly, I should have told him this." So, but no, that's a deal. But really, Hanford was a good place to work, and it to me, it's been real good to me. So I got a good retirement off of it, and that.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
You bet.
I really appreciate it.
You bet. And see, now that he's got that shut off, I'll tell you about my week. I took my motor home and went to El Waco. You know where El Waco is? It's on the Columbia River.
Yeah, okay.
On the way over there,